All right, so I'm responding here to something Vitamin E Mafia, known as IC Pattern, said, which Defender asked for me to chime in on. I'm going to use video and voice. It's going to be time wasted and slow, but that's because I want to think about some of this stuff. And I also want to present it with more than just like words. Some pretty important axioms for this is that like language is compression, artifacts are inherent. I'm gonna get a lot more into that, and you're gonna see probably why I need my face on camera for this, as I start fumbling around some concepts that I understand but can't express. All right, so I'm gonna read it out for you here. IC Pattern was saying that massive alien interdimensional forces possessing humanity with their own aims and goals that live and die based on our recognition or attention of them, but we call them egregores, thought forms, tulpas, metaforms, idea forms. In which case, Defender of Basic responded with, "We're not ready yet. But I'm betting on," and then he references some people, Levin, which I believe is Michael Levins from the YouTube channel Michael Levin's Academic Content, Wolfram, I think that's the Wolfram Alpha guy, and Blaise Aguilera, I don't know who that is. So Defender says, "We're not ready, but I'm betting on these people making this legible to the masses." And then he says that they're already making the concrete claim that there exists intelligence at greater scales than humanity. And then he pings me. Probably because he wants my brand of crazy to cut through and connect some strings. All right, so let's go back to the beginning here. Massive alien interdimensional forces possessing humanity. Okay, so I think we can break this down into some smaller chunks. We don't necessarily need to say they're interdimensional. They can be entirely from our dimension. I agree that they are interdimensional, but we don't need to go that far. Specifically because what I'm most interested in addressing here is the "we're not ready yet" claim, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And by we, I mean humans, humanity, consciousness on this planet, life where we're at right now, the memetic structure that we use to frame the narratives that allow us to be cohesive and be these shared reality forming apes that all kind of agree upon an orality that the more we look at, we can't see. That's that whole thing that I like saying, that human sense organs are limited. Like, we can't actually see most of the stuff we do, and most of the stuff we see are built on constructs that we make up. Whether you want to talk about the biology of our vision or our smell, or whether you want to talk about how like we use mathematics to structure order where there is maybe less order than we like or we're comfortable with. I'll get there. So we're not ready yet. So let's bring back, instead of interdimensional, let's just call them dimensional. Let's call alien forces, and let's say alien is just what isn't us. Interestingly, this appears to be some of the final points of the video that Michael Levin pointed at, that modern day therapists and whatnot need to deal with the fact that the complexity, the diaspora, the confusion, the milieu with which makes up individual humans within humanity is ever expanding, especially with technology progressing, things like transhumanism and cybernetics, and then, biomachines, as he was talking about. I didn't know about one of those ones. It's really interesting, the little bit of throat lozenge that has escaped and can make its own little decisions. Well, if we talk about the alien as an external possessing humanity, we quickly notice that this is not a novel idea. This idea that there are thought forms, egregores, tulpas, metaforms, idea forms. Like, the entire precept of Western civilization is essentially Platonic, like as in from Plato, as in from Athens. I know we've got huge other interferences like Alexandria and Israel and Rome and all that, but like, some of our first conceptualizations about a shared reality that allows us to bond with other humans beyond tribe. Essentially, the first formations of a mono Homo sapien sapien, rather than just the Homo sapien who ran with Neanderthal, who grew out of Erectus. We're talking a million years past fire here. So when we talk about that these alien forces possess humanity with their own aims and goals, this doesn't seem at all like a crazy theory. The original meme here is that, like, hear me out, spirits, but we call them psychological drives and archetypes. Yeah, it literally is all spirits, but it also literally isn't. Remember, we started off with this important concept that language is compression, artifacts are inherent. The only thing that we can do is we can paint a form with our words that will kind of give a shape around the object of what we're trying to describe. And when Defender says we're not ready yet, I think we can directly tie that into Levin. When Levin is talking about how, excuse me as I scrub along a timeline here to get the words. With various intelligence that exist across the cell level, the tissue level, the organism level, the swarm level, the ecosystem level, humanity is already starting to wrap their head around these concepts that, like, what I am is not what I am simply because of what I think, therefore I am. A lot of our cutting edge way of dealing with reality, everything that gave us nukes, equals MC squared, all of that stuff, it really kind of tells us that time isn't as we understand it. And modern wisdom sort of takes you up to this plank at the end of existence and just drops you off into an abyss where there is nothing. Because we're finally at the point where we're asking questions that unravel reality. Which means, it's kind of our responsibility to put it back together. But what's interesting about the responsibility of putting it back together is that it doesn't necessarily come from any individual force or will. It's a collective negotiation across all the myriad nodes that consummate our knowledge net. Yeah, that sounds right. It's a myriad of interactions across all of the nodes that consummate our knowledge net. And one of the reasons the Gnostics are so successful is they take this logic as, like, as above, as below. And they can run this out into a pretty natural conclusion of, well, I said this, so then this is true, so I said this, and then this is true. But the problem is this can't be done on an individual scale. Because if something is as above, as below, then wherever we are in that spectra, the only thing we can know for certain is that because we are in the spectra, we are not we are not the spectra. I think this can take us back to essentially set theory and dealing with how, like, all the rational numbers are infinite, but all the irrational numbers between the rational numbers are also infinite, even though one of those infinite sets fits within the other infinite set. So you can have, like, different sizes of infinity. Well, when we're talking about biomedical interventions, dealing with bottom up, dealing with, like, medicine, surgery, transplant, stem cells, editing, but, like, top down, where we're dealing with No, that's going to take me off on a tangent where I'm going to get confused. Yeah. So essentially, we're not ready yet to understand the level of complexity from which we derive answers. Because our answers will always be lesser than the complexity which they arise to. I said that a little wrong. Anyways, this is why I wanted voice. I can look at myself, hear myself. It's a lot easier with writing to, like, talk about clear things, but we are right on the edge of where writing actually does us a lot of... Writing's not doing us harm. I was about to say harm. It's more that when we call these thought forms, tulpas, metaforms, idea forms, in order to get the idea into my head, in order to hold it and spit it out without my both literal and figurative head exploding, they must fit. If things don't fit together, they don't fit together. There's no togetherness. There's a fracturing. Otherwise, they'd be together. And the fitment of all of these various explanations is really what we're dealing with. Egregores, thought forms, tulpas, metaforms, idea forms, platonic ideals, all of these sort of concepts, they definitionally are alien. We aren't our thoughts. We're meatbags who traverse through a set realm, and we are built and grown by our other shared meatbags in order to conceptualize and interact with and grasp, change, and move that which those meat forms have developed in concert the ability to manage. When we're dealing with the idea that ideas themselves have form, we start we're immediately put up against the first front, is that, like, to express something that you're unsure of is historically within our culture weakness. And we start dealing with both the manner in which we have been generationally poisoned, and the way in which we've been generationally conditioned, and the way in which we've been generationally grown. So we are definitively not ready to integrate forms of knowledge in which our own agency is compressively diminished, unless we are able to integrate those compressions of diminishment into a growth. And I think this is why Levin is talking about how Cancer is... I wish I had more capacity to remember exact words and frames. I'm going to scan through this video. Yeah, when Levin is talking about an anthro-robot, where they've taken, like, human cells and thrown them into a petri dish, and it starts exhibiting novel properties that behave as the output of their new confined interface with the manifold edges of our reality. Well, these alien interdimensional forces which possess humanity with their own aims and goals and live and die based on our recognition or attention of them, because we call them egregores or thought forms, tulpas, metaforms, or idea forms. These are the flatland, to borrow from Sagan. These are the flatland intercuts of the apple that we watch passing through our realm. If we're the two-dimensional beings and we're watching this apple come down through our plane, we only ever see new lines and walls and shapes of forms. But if we were to pull back, we'd see the apple moving through. The same way as though if we take, like, a cube and then we, like, enter through the cube until we find the tesseractical four-dimensional hyperplane space. That same way in which we can go a step beyond ourselves, where some people can astrally project, or some people can, read minds. Some people can cold read really well. That kind of stuff. All of these things are the I don't even want to say human macro self-organism. At this point, at this scale, we're not really talking about humanity. At this scale, there's really no difference between the dinosaurs and us. We're just talking about like life on this blue marble in this section of the solar system. It's not solar system. Yeah, okay. In this section of the solar system, this section of the local cluster, this section of the Perseus arm, this section of the Milky Way galaxy. And we are at a point right now where we actually cannot address what other alien forces may or may not be managing things like our Fermi field, Fermi filters. We're not at a point yet where there is any. My instinct was to say there's no constructive way, but it actually is there's plenty of constructive way. There's just no constructive ways from which we can build a scaffolding that which we ourselves can climb upon. Because it is simply true that all that which we think is true. Now, whether or not what is true will iteratively continue, this is one of those human sense organs are limited and language is inherently compressive and artifacts are inherently there. All of this discomfort with being able to articulate an answer is because these aren't alien interdimensional forces in the same way that I am a force. They are interdimensional forces in the same way that gravity, electromagnetism, God, evil, they're forces in that way. They are structural elements of not just our shared reality, but the presuppositions that would require of not just our shared reality, but also of the presuppositions that reality requires of itself to be. It is effectively a given that there are supernatural forces. We've been chattering about this. Well, I've been chattering about it for 17 minutes and 54 seconds, but humanity's been chattering about it for at least 10,000 years. Like, even if Gobekli Tepe isn't anything special, and even if all of our current narratives were true, which, like, they're not capable, like, stats won't allow that level of accuracy to exist at any point in time, for we are but within a spectra. We are within a set. We can't externalize the set. Like, you can't punch your way out of a paper bag if the paper bag is the borders of your reality. And when when Levin is talking about how cancers are discontinuities between, I'm completely bastardizing him, so I want to remove the when Levin says. What I hear when Levin is saying that cancers are, damn it, I'm not quoting him. I'm just going to continue paraphrasing him. When Levin is, apologies, I'm so stuck. I don't know this guy, and I don't want to get off on the wrong foot, and I'm in the middle of yelling at another dude that I super respect on the internet, so I'm, like, shook by that. Also, if you notice, this isn't the rationalizing component of being human comes after the emotional reaction. These ideas to tackle egregore forms, thought forms, metaforms, one of the reasons we know they're real is because mathematics, reasoning, runaway societal contagion, all of these things physically can render us sick. And this isn't some novel observation. As I mentioned immediately when I started watching Levin's video at the timestamp, I meant, holy shit, this Michael Levin guy is writing a legal defense of my style of medicine within scientific hegemony. Um, we have these like rule sets that we're allowed to play within. All the games are fixed because if the game wasn't fixed, it wouldn't be a game. It would just be the thing that exists beyond the game. The thing humans aren't ready for is the level of discontinuity with the self that arises from the awareness of the self's limitations. And what we are coming to terms with in our current scientific hegemony is at the borders of that game where the game borders fray. Exactly like Levin was talking about how there isn't just one human anymore. There is a miasmic section of human-like entities from child to elderly birth, from one person to another, from a person who augments their thoughts with AI to a person who's a Luddite and is plowing the fields. All of these people are interfacing with different subsets of narratives. And whenever anyone is whenever anyone is taken from a place where they can survive and they are transported to a place where they can't survive because they lack the skills, the understanding, the capacity, they cease to survive. Whether you pick someone up and drop them in a desert that they don't know, or whether you pick someone up and you drop them in a realm of thoughts that they can't navigate, it's an obvious conclusion that the organism will fail if it isn't capable of handling the situation. Now, what am I? I am a billions, if not trillions, system of clockwork biomachines that all organize together in a concert to produce what is now 22 minutes of what to the vast majority of human beings necessitates crazy schizophrenic rambling because they require the biological support of the narratives which they can manage. So when people are saying about how like spirits, but we call them psychological drives and archetypes, and alien interdimensional forces are managing things, and when I'm talking about the Yggdrasil world tree and the Rainbow Road and the possible alien entities that colonized our arm, and then 10,000 years ago the Perseus arm was penetrated by a rogue system of planets that brought us the Norn and supernovaed Wolf and gave us all sorts of crazy floods and gave us the young Dryas impact, all of those concepts. This is all noise, and we are actively trying to render the signal. A huge portion of the pain and suffering across our world has been from the rapid runaway expansions of understanding with an insufficient support structure of the core grounding that allows our biological continuum to function as an individual, I want to say individual perspective, but there's something not right about the individual. Something about a cohesive community of parts organizing themselves into an individual. But really the point is that for those who have the framework to accept You can pick somebody up and you can throw them in a desert. They'll die. Unless they know how to survive in a desert. But there's some people, let's take Les Stroud, Survivor Man. You can take that guy and you can throw him in a desert. You can throw him in an Arctic. You can throw him in a jungle. You can throw him pretty much anywhere. And he's going to survive. These undefinable definitions, the manageable paradoxes of our navigation. These are the tools that present man is trying to figure out how to wield and use. There's a disconnect. There's many disconnects. These tools that we're trying to hold on to survive in the desert and the jungle of these new platonic spaces, they quite literally threaten all that we are and that all that we've ever really built into becoming. Because at this point I need to start talking about, damn it, this is what's so difficult about talking about all these subjects, because not only do I need to find words that I can survive, I need to find words that my audience can survive, and I need to crystallize space which is survivable. And that's why there's so much confusion about whether something is a spirit, whether something is an angel or a demon, or whether something is a jinn or an ancestor or a small god or the god or a large god or an alien entity. Because we're not actually fighting about the answer. You can just take like a meta study of all human belief, religion, and thought since something like 400,000 years ago, Erectus got fire, like, controlled. 600,000 years before that, more than a million years ago, we had medicine, family, fire, religion, burial. I call burial religion. If you're gonna instead of getting food, dig a hole and put your dead in it, like, even if you're an animal, that's fucking crazy. Like, elephants maybe do it. We definitely do it. That's religion. Sorry, I digress. And you'll notice the reason this video is 28 minutes long is just as much as the words themselves are ideas. There's no avoiding the work. Like, while I've been talking about this, there is a discomfort down here in sort of the left side of my gut. And it's built as a sort of like little reminder. My body's throwing me up fears and dangers because like, I'm a little bit more experienced than most people when it comes to like going into the place that I don't understand and just being like, I'll live. I don't even know how I have. But that's just like a snapshot of what all the individual nodes of humanity are doing. We're trying to navigate a path towards deeper understanding. But we already have the deeper understanding. We're trying to build a framework where individuals have more graspable shape forms by which they can navigate the miasma of complex space that is unbounded by our language's compression, by our perception's compression, and unbounded by the infrastructure of our world, that which allows us to get water, food, shelter, health, wealth, opportunity. That's the culmination of the other ones. And we are being afforded presently the opportunity to advance these comprehensions. But it's not any of the individual comprehensions that's advancing us. What is advancing is our ability to survive in a new state space. We are learning how to make a piss still in the desert. And we are learning how to chop a tree to get clean water out of a vine in the jungle. And in order to learn these things, we are having to accept the limitations of ourselves. And we can go back thousands of years and take some of the Buddhist traditions that have systems of paradox that are organized and reflected upon simply to expand one's mind. And I think this is where Michael Levin is really articulating something truly beautiful in a mechanical way that almost no one in our macro society temporarily today is capable of pushing back against. That cancer is a discontinuity of narrative. That it is that illness is a discontinuity of narrative. That it is one part of my body not agreeing with what another part of my body says is supposed to be the next step. And that's why all this shit is so controversial. Because the moral panic people, they're not wrong. They're just cowardly. They're just stupid. But that's just because they're not me. And they wish to survive in a different form than I do. Now, that isn't to say that we should accept all of the various opinions. There are plenty of opinions that directly lead towards paths that we already understand are inconclusive ends, that we die, like communism and starvation. But we are having to grasp presently that even though individuals must make all of their own decisions, no individual has any framework with which to make any decision. And this is where we start getting into the concepts where like things like spirits and interdimensional forces and all these things, we start getting into the relationships between these ideas. And what do the relationships between these ideas have us move towards? Because it's all fine and good to acknowledge the own limitation of the self. But if acknowledging the limitation of the self... Here, let me hit myself real hard here. If acknowledging the limitation of the self brings you into a room so tight and closed where you spend all your time clicking away on thoughts and you wither away and you die, then it doesn't matter how correct you are in your self-flagellation of your limited capacity to interface with reality. And I guess that's what I can really end on, is massive alien interdimensional forces are possessing humanity. They do have their own aims and goals, and they do live and die based on our recognition or attention of them. And we do call them egregores and thought forms and tulpas and metaforms. Spirits are real, and we call them psychological drives and archetypes. And we're not ready for any of this. Because we're really, really young. 1,000,000 years is not a long time. 10,000 years is not a long time. And if you think the wrong thoughts, you die. So it's not actually important whether all of these thoughts are true. It's important that we begin to grow the scaffolding by which our future forms will be more capable of handling a wider dispersion of ideas. Because speech is compressive, artifacts are inherent. So what's important is our ability to keep track of the stack of artifacts so that we can audit their interplay, so we can witness which forms of presence that are longer or larger than our own contain oscillations of movement within the possible stack of artifacts. So we can discern the truth that is most consistent between the state spaces which we can illuminate. Yeah, I think that's it.